Julie Andrews spent years giving the world absolute calm. You picture neat gloves, perfect posture, and the kind of warmth that makes people think of safety and order. Because her screen image made stillness look so natural, people often slide that feeling backward and imagine she must have come from something similar. You picture a tidy childhood with steady, loving adults close at hand, living in a home with security built right into the walls. But you believe something entirely false if you believe that picture. The child who later came to stand for comfort did not grow up inside comfort. She grew up inside sheer upheaval. Her real early life was shaped by war, family breakup, poverty, absence, and relentless strain. Her parents split during World War II, a fact that alone could shake the ground under any child. Her mother left her first husband and married Ted Andrews, a performer, creating a new family shape, while the country itself was tearing apart under immense stress. London was under the Blitz, bringing danger from the sky, rationing, and daily fear. Housing was poor, money was terribly tight, and the adults she depended on were often away performing for troops. She later described those years as a deeply turbulent time, calling the war years a very black period in her life. That heavy phrase does not belong to a soft, easy childhood. It belongs to pure survival. War is hard enough when a home is secure, but a broken home in wartime is something else entirely. To make the fragile home even more uncertain, her stepfather struggled with alcoholism, meaning the pressure was not only outside the front door, but inside the household. A child living in that kind of setting learns quickly that moods can change fast, the ground can tilt, and a day can go wrong in an instant. Before the grand entrances, before the famous roles, there was a child traveling across Britain during wartime, moving through a world already torn open. The family needed income desperately, and touring for troops was not a decorative extra. It was tied directly to their survival. Fellow child performer Petula Clark later recalled those trips by train and remembered a detail that changes everything you think you know about her. They slept in the luggage racks, not seats, not compartments, the luggage racks. That is a hard fact about what kind of childhood this actually was. She was very young, and the work around her was treated like serious, necessary family labor. People often picture child stars as protected little wonders shielded by adults, or they imagine a fairy tale beginning where talent lifts a child into a brighter world. This story points in the exact opposite direction. She was not floating above ordinary life. She was deep inside its rough edges. The train itself becomes part of the story because it shows how little distance existed between her childhood and intense labor. She was a child singer moving through wartime Britain, sleeping above the seats like extra baggage because the act had to keep going. War compresses people's lives and removes softness, turning cheap rail travel into a lifeline and a cramped bad night's sleep into an acceptable routine. In that harsh world, a luggage rack is not a symbol first. It is a rough, necessary solution. She learned early that comfort is not guaranteed and that talent is not only admired, but highly useful. In a family dependent on performance income, a gifted child does not stand at the edge of the enterprise. She is part of the machine trying to keep the household moving. The financial strain made everything tighter, turning her voice into a vital asset. She later said her family was very poor and lived in a bad slum area of London. Those are plain words, but they land hard, pointing to real hardship and real rough housing. Because money was short and the house was strained, she ended up working young to help support the family. Long before the public image settled around her, she was a small child being pushed onto stages out of severe financial necessity. She stood on a beer crate so her voice could reach the microphone. That one practical object cuts straight through the myth of effortless charm. It replaces the legend with something rougher and smaller. A child too short for the microphone, a crate under her feet, and adult spaces all around her. These were not neat childhood platforms arranged to preserve innocence while showing off talent. They were working environments in pubs and variety shows, built around audiences, noise, adult, habits, and money-changing hands. No one stopped the scene to make it pretty. They made it work. Her lovely voice became household value, pulling her childhood fully into the financial struggle. Each song was no longer only an expression of talent, it became part of the household economy. The polished adult performer you know grew out of a child who learned to work under less than perfect conditions, using whatever was at hand. She did not begin above the mess. She began inside it. That early labor cemented something else that followed her forever, her name. You might think a famous person sits down one day and chooses a beautiful stage name, but life does not work that neatly. The name Andrews stayed because it reached her before fame ever did. It came into her life when she was still a child, right after her mother married Ted Andrews. She took the surname then, and by the time she was performing publicly, it was already attached to her. People sometimes ask why she did not simply take back Wells, her birth surname, once she grew up. But once a child performer starts building a life in front of audiences, a name stops being a private label and becomes the thing the business holds on to. Wells may have been her birth surname, but it was not the name under which she entered the stage world. Andrews was the current household name, the name attached to the home where she was largely raised, and the name that became normal in daily use. A young performer needs recognition, and the same name on performance bills and contracts creates a line people can follow. Andrews carried her from childhood into performance. It did not reflect her biological father, but in practical life, it was the stronger name because it traveled with her through the years that formed her public self. Fame fastened itself to it, and the name absorbed her entirely, moving from household name to child's name to world-famous name without breaking. It was not a grand act of self-invention. It was a child absorbing family change, and that name eventually became stronger than choice. That name was firmly in place by the time she faced the most intimidating audience of her young life. She was only 13 when she sang at the London Palladium in 1948 before King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. If you hear that story fast, you picture a sweet, lucky moment where a little girl gets one magical chance. But she did not walk onto that stage just because adults thought it would be charming. By 13, she was already far beyond the level people expect from a child. She had made her professional solo debut at 12. She had training, discipline, stage experience, and a mature soprano voice that made professionals pay absolute attention. Royal events were high-profile showcases that needed people who could deliver live, under intense pressure, in front of the most important audience in the room. There was no reward for being promising someday. The person chosen had to be ready right then. She was selected because adults in that world believed she already had that control. She became the youngest solo performer ever to appear in that royal setting. Normally, age is the massive barrier that gets held against a young performer. In her case, age became the thing she overcame before most children could even imagine such a room. The performance gave her national visibility and marked her as a true prodigy. It was a public declaration that her work had reached a level too high to keep off that stage. The setting did not shrink to fit her youth. She rose to fit the setting. Even as her career began to soar, the family's brutal history of struggle remained vividly close. After the war, her family moved into a house that looked like a major step into safety and comfort. It felt like a victory, as if the hard years had finally ended and life was improving. but Julie later revealed a sharp detail that turns the entire moment inside out. Her maternal grandmother had once worked there as a maid. The same property that now sheltered the family had once belonged to the world of service and intense class distance that shaped them. That one fact changes the feeling of the move instantly. It was not a simple escape from poverty. The house became a symbol of a massive class line that had not vanished, but had only been crossed for a while. Her memoir treats the move as a poignant reversal, a moment carrying both victory and heavy memory. The family reached something better, but they stepped into a place where memory was built directly into the walls. One generation served in that house, and another arrived as residents. It shows how class shapes a family long before a famous child is born, and how social position is inherited in ways deeper and harder than money. When someone has grown through real uncertainty, safety feels physical. A room, a door, a place to finally stay. The old order was still visible even in the exact moment of triumph, making the shelter feel like a fragile victory built against old, stubborn odds. She was standing inside that fragile victory when her mother broke open a secret that shattered her understanding of herself. She was exactly 14. The disclosure did not happen with careful hints or a slow talk stretching over months. It happened all at once. Her mother took her to a social gathering and introduced her to the man who was actually her biological father. Then, on the drive home, her mother told Julie the stunning truth. The man Julie had always believed was her father, Edward Charles Wells, was not her biological parent after all. 14 is a brutal age for a secret like that to land. It is old enough to understand what betrayal is, but young enough for one sentence to completely split life into a before and an after. She had to rebuild the family she thought she knew while still sitting in the same car with the same mother driving beside her. The reason for the secret was deeply painful. Her mother had an extramarital affair before Julie was born. Because of that, Julie was raised by Wells as her father, living inside a truth that other adults had arranged around her. She was handed the truth after first being brought face to face with the man at the center of it. The sequence is unbearably sharp. Meet him, learn what he means, and go home carrying both massive facts at once. But nothing visible had changed. She still loved Wells as her real dad. He had raised her, and the habit, daily life, care, and trust were already firmly there. The truth arrived and did something cruelly complicated. It forced two truths to stand in the same room. The biological fact suddenly changed, but the emotional fact did not budge. The secret changed the bloodline on paper, but it did not change the man she still knew, still loved, and still carried as her dad. Decades later, she wrote her memoir, Home, and finally shared the existence of the affair with the world. She revealed that the man who raised her was not her biological father. But then she did something very unusual for a famous person. She stopped short of throwing the door wide open. She did not name the biological father. People expect a full reveal in a celebrity book. They expect names and bright scandal. She completely refused to give that. She gave the truth she felt was needed, and she held back the part that would turn private pain into cheap public exposure. Her memoir was about her early years, the wartime childhood, intense poverty, the Blitz, and the family turmoil. In that larger story, the fact of her biological father mattered, but his public identity did not have to. Most importantly, the memoir presentation stressed heavily that Ted Wells was the father she loved. That bond stayed in perfect place even after she learned the biological truth. By naming the truth, but not the man, she kept the focus exactly where she wanted it. She protected the relationship that actually formed her. To elevate the biological father by publicly naming him would risk giving him a place in the story that her own heart simply did not grant him. She showed something exceptionally rare in a life story. She knew exactly where honesty ended and exposure began, and she chose honesty without an ounce of cruelty. Next time you watch her float across a screen bringing order and peace, remember the dark reality she stood on to get there. The composure she later gave to millions of viewers did not come from an easy life. It came from a child who learned early how to survive disorder, carry massive family secrets, and keep working anyway.